Welcome back to the Five Insider with the busiest man in football. It's David Ornstein. What time did you get to bed last night?
I'm not sure about the busiest, but certainly one of the most tired. And and if I look fresh, certainly looks can be deceiving because I don't feel it. It was about 3:10 in the morning.
Mate, you're looking good for 3:10.
But that's pretty standard for a deadline day. I think if you manage to get some sleep at all, you're winning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a fairly busy deadline day given how quiet the window was as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. It was hectic on the day itself because there was a lot going on. A lot had to go on. But maybe it wasn't the profile that a lot of people were expecting when we've been so used to in recent years seeing massive deals like Enzo Fernandez going right up to the wire. The summer windows are always busier than January, but in recent years, January has actually ramped up and this wasn't the case. Over the month, you still can pick out things that were quite notable from Tottenham's sort of early flurry. You've got Jordan Henderson leaving Saudi Arabia for Ajax. Aston Villa, this Morgan Rogers saga. Chelsea, Brozier, will he, won't he? But across the board, it was relatively subdued. And that's down to a few reasons. Firstly, I think clubs are making a greater effort to get their houses in order and build around the summer windows to make sure that they've got their squad largely in place for the entire season and realising that January is not a good market to do business. Prices are inflated. You've got to question why players are available. You might be looking for an emergency solution, but then you're not going to get good value for money. But the bigger issue here that's being talked about throughout football is profitability and sustainability rules, PSR, formerly known as financial fair play. For many years, I think clubs thought they could spend whatever they wanted and get away with it without fear of sanction. But then you've seen in recent times, Manchester City, 115 charges. That case is still to be heard. They vehemently deny them and adamant that they're going to prove their innocence. You've got Everton, who were charged, punished, 10-point deduction. The appeal against that is being heard as we speak. They then got charged again, as did Nottingham Forest. And what that has sent out as a message to the rest of the league is that these rules and regulations are real, they have teeth, and we don't want to be in that position. So you see a Newcastle United not signing any players because they can't afford to under these strict regulations. They do have the money, but they don't have the maneuverability in the system. They need to increase their revenues through sponsorships, through sales, to be able to spend more because you can only spend what you earn. It's about balancing the books and sort of cutting your cloth accordingly. And it was a similar situation throughout the league. Every club you spoke to, we can't do much because of PSR. Arsenal did nothing, Manchester United did nothing, and that was for these reasons. What we could see coming up, and it's something to keep a very close eye on, is the 30th of June, because that's when the calculation ends for the financial year.
The reset.
Exactly. And so if you've got a hole to fill, I'll use Aston Villa, for example, they need to make up some money, so do many clubs. And so they may need to shift out maybe a couple of young players, maybe a John Duran. And that's why when I revealed that there were clubs looking at Jacob Ramsey, it was because reluctantly, clubs like Aston Villa need to think about these homegrown players, whether we like it or not, as potential solutions to their FFP problems. We've heard all about it with Conor Gallagher. He ended up staying. And there are many examples across the league now. And if they're still in trouble come June the 30th, because they didn't do enough outgoing business in January, then I think there will be a flurry of activity to make sure they're compliant. Then, from June the 30th onwards, I think clubs will be a little bit more liberated because they're in the next cycle. And then they'll be able to spend a bit more. So those are two of the factors. And then there's one more I'd mention. The Saudi Pro League fueled so much of the spending last summer. They were willing to buy players at great expense and it brought cash into the system. They didn't do anything of note in January. And so that would have been a factor in everybody else slowing down. I expect them to go again in the summer. I've been told it will be a different story again. And that makes me think that this is maybe a calm before the next storm.
Massive news this January. Of course, Omar Barada coming to Manchester United. I think you broke that story. Yep. Just looking ahead a little bit, we've seen reports coming out about Manchester United sporting director search, what's going on with that, a timeline. We've even seen some names linked. Where are Manchester United with Omar Barada arriving? Because of course he's got his gardening leave, and with that sort of sporting director search under Ineos.
Yeah, well, the chief executive search was sort of driven and led by Ineos because they've got their agreement in place, and we know it's to take sporting control and potentially even extending that influence further, which is something we reported on The Athletic and is quite interesting for a minority shareholder.
Yeah.
And it also says and underlines that they've got eyes on a full takeover in due course. Barada was a pursuit that was really, what's the word, discreet?
Yeah, under the radar, wasn't it?
And slick.
Very un-Man United over the years.
You could say that, certainly under the Glazer regime. But it shows there are new sheriffs in town. And one thing we're assured of is that the Glazers were fully on board with this and moving in step with Ineos. It was kind of presented as a joint appointment, even though Ineos, with their expertise, were kind of leading the charge, and came about very quickly. And it was an unforgettable one for me because I was on a plane with terrible Wi-Fi trying to break this massive story. And
what happens when that sort of thing goes off? Stress.
Extreme stress. And, you know, when you're 10,000 feet up, you can't tether off of somebody's phone or find a different network. You're at the mercy of the technology, and immediately you think this is going to come out elsewhere. We're going to lose it. There's going to be an announcement, and you're liaising with people and conducting all of the checks that you have to do journalistically. But you can't speak to people verbally because you've got no phone signal. The Wi-Fi calling doesn't work. You can leave voice notes, but people want to speak to you. And this isn't just a sort of low-level transfer update or injury. It's a really significant one. And it wasn't a short flight either. So, I was pacing up and down the aisle, like trying to find better signal, which surely doesn't exist. But then eventually I managed to get a bit towards the end and we got it over the line. And it really sort of sent shockwaves throughout the industry. Not our story. I wouldn't be that presumptuous. The appointment itself and the reputation that Barada comes with from Man City, the local rivalry, it had all the ingredients of a top story. I think that and Jurgen Klopp, which we'll come on to speak about in a bit, were the biggest stories of January, and they weren't about football transfer or player transfers, more movements of managers and executives. And what this does is provides Man United's executive structure with a focal point, because he'll have executive leadership on football and business, he'll have a seat on the board, he'll report into ownership, and I'm sure he'll build a team around him as well. And that's your sort of key question here. Where do things go next?
It's what Man United fans are asking the questions about.
So of course the priority will be one or two appointments. We don't know exactly. So you hear and see so many rumours, like when you and I were talking about the investment process. Will it be Ineos? Will it be Sheikh Jassim? What day is it going to be? It's going to happen in 1 week or 2 weeks, and that was being said month after month. And this may be similar, because there are suggestions that they're going to bring in a couple of people in the next couple of weeks. But at the end of that couple of weeks, it'll be a couple of weeks more. And so a bit of patience is required on that, but it is a priority, obviously, to get those. One, because the transfer window is now out the way for January, which means the summer one is coming. Two, the Ineos ratification, the formal confirmation of their investment, is expected to arrive in the coming days, early February, maybe next week. And then they've got their feet properly under the table, even though Sir Jim Radcliffe, Sir Dave Brailsford, Jean-Claude Blanc
They're very visible, haven't they?
Visible inside Carrington, Old Trafford, and even to the public. And so loads of names floating around. There was a piece by James Ducker in the Telegraph saying that names such as Dan Ashworth, Julian Ward, Paul Mitchell, Dougie Freedman had all been in the consideration. Dan Ashworth is a really interesting one, because clearly there's a relationship there with Sir Dave Brailsford and Ineos, and he's extremely highly thought of by them and throughout the industry. But he's in a top job at Newcastle. I'm sure they would expect him to continue in that. And despite the speculation, we haven't seen anything concrete to suggest that Ineos are definitely going for him, Man United, I should say, that he would be interested in the opportunity. So, and now you've got a new voice in the room and at the table, because Barada wasn't there before, and he is now, and somebody of his repute will want to meet with a number of candidates, understand the situation, how the land lies, and there will also be things like non-compete clauses in the contracts of people that are already in employment, perhaps even extended gardening leave, so you don't know. And then Paul Mitchell was one that has been mentioned throughout, a top operator in his own right, who's worked at Southampton and Tottenham, RB Leipzig and Monaco. My understanding is that this is a position that he wasn't particularly seeing himself in the frame for from the beginning, from a long time ago, and made that clear to the Ineos guys, and they were all on the same page. They will know each other because Ineos, largely based in the south of France, and Paul Mitchell was sporting director at Monaco. So, and they're of the same nationality, like Brailsford and Mitchell, etc. So this would have been something that I'm sure would have been broached a long time ago. And I can only go on my information and speaking to people around the industry. It was never something that Paul Mitchell was looking to pursue. Ineos were aware of that. So I don't really know how that's kept rumbling away. There's huge respect for each other. But I think it was made clear around Monaco and his departure from there that he would be looking to spend more time with his family and consider his next step and review various opportunities, and that won't be at Manchester United. Julian Ward is extremely highly rated in his own right for the work he did at Liverpool. He's somebody that I've heard that Ineos are very impressed by. He speaks multiple languages. He's worked in Portugal before. He worked at Man City previously, so I would suspect there was some sort of
relationship with Omar,
and background with Omar Barada. And so again, one that we'll have to wait and see. Definitely a contender in the conversation. And then Dougie Freedman has done a fantastic job, in my view, at Crystal Palace. Some of the signings that they've made in his time in terms of Eze, Elise, Mark Gehi, and now Adam Wharton, which is maybe one I'll touch on quickly. Fantastic signing. People have said 18-ish to 22 million is a lot of money, but I've loved what I've seen of him at Blackburn. He's an England youth international who many think will go on to be a full England international, a really unique style of play. And I think we should wish him well, moving from Blackburn down to South London.
Mirrors the successes they've had as well, taking them the championship. You know,
definitely.
And they've been able to do there.
Yeah, and so Dougie Freedman, we hear that he's got a good relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson, and Sir Alex Ferguson perhaps vouches for him. So there's some good candidates there. But one thing I have to say is that there will almost certainly be candidates that are not being talked about.
I mean, look at Omar Barada. Nobody was talking about him as CEO.
Precisely. And so if they're going to appoint, say, a sporting director and a technical director, or a technical director and a head of recruitment, one or two appointments is the sort of consensus, then it could come from left field. And we could see people emerge that previously we weren't discussing. But I just wanted to touch on all of those ones who had been in the public domain. And that obviously is going to be a massive part of Manchester United's project going forward. They'll have to have discussions about the managerial situation. Erik ten Hag, I've got no information to suggest that they're not behind him and going to go forward with him. Come the summer, he'll have a year left on his contract and an option to extend beyond that. So no doubt both parties will need to have conversations. But when you see results like at Wolves last night, even though it didn't come easily, those are the sort of galvanising, formative moments that many clubs and managers go through, and especially after a week of yet more controversy over Marcus Rashford, off the back of Jadon Sancho, the Mason Greenwood situation, Cristiano Ronaldo before that, and the investment as well. It's been a complete rollercoaster for Man United, for Erik ten Hag. But they will hope with some of these young players in particular, like Kobe Mainu.
Goodness me, what a player.
I mean, another product to the Manchester United Academy. And when he's performing at this level, you start to even wonder for country as well as club. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just say that Manchester United have got some ingredients there on the pitch to actually turn things around quite quickly. And we've seen in football, it doesn't take that long to get things right. If you've got the right people, the right structures, and good decision making. So let's see how they go.
Yeah, I mean, whilst we're on the topic of, managers and chief executives and backroom staff, we've got to talk about Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp, the announcement that took the world by storm, effectively. And there's also been, the announcement that his backroom staff are going to leave alongside him. The sporting director's going to leave as well, though I think he was kind of on a short-term deal anyway. What are Liverpool fans to expect over the next 6 months? Are they going to see an appointment potentially before the end of the season? What's going on behind the scenes there?
Yeah, firstly, the shock news of a week ago today, last Friday, was seismic is the word that everybody's been using. It felt like the earth of football and sport shook in a not too dissimilar way to Lewis Hamilton joining Ferrari.
There wasn't even a tiny leak, was there? There wasn't even a tiny bit of news, even in the world of football behind the scenes.
No, and it came even as a surprise to the players, who I think had a meeting at around 10:30 or something. The news was released at 10:36, and I do hear that some of the senior players weren't particularly best pleased with that, because they would have liked to know in advance, which I do understand. But I also understand Liverpool and Klopp's perspective, that the more people you tell, the more risk it has of coming out and you losing control of it. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Yeah. And I'm sure they will understand in time. You say it was a complete shock. The timing definitely was that it happened that day. And a lot of Liverpool fans have told me in my reporting, I've tried to be wise after the event, not in the slightest. I'm casting my mind back to factual conversations last summer where it hadn't been the best season for Liverpool. Quite a few people were saying, wouldn't be surprising if he goes during the next season if things don't pick up. Well, they have picked up, so fair play. But the fact that people were saying that shows that it wasn't like a perfect situation. And there were others who did feel that he may go in the summer of 2024. They didn't know. It was just a feeling based on a couple of factors. One, when he signed his new contract in the summer of 2022, he extended until 2026 from 2024. So it was a 2-year extension. He was meant to go in the summer of 2024, which is what is actually happening now. Yeah, he extended till 2026. The conversations I've had, though, suggest there was a bit of an understanding, if nothing formal, that it was really a deal until 2025, and then some dialogue would be had. Do we want to go on, or do we want to call it quits there? And if that's the case, stand to be corrected if it's not, but you can only report what you're told. Then right now we're into the final 18 months. And if you're a player in that position, you really need to be signing a new contract or be sold.
Yeah.
And that's what clubs are trying to do these days. If you're a manager, it's even more important because you're in control and have influence over so much. And so Jurgen Klopp has taken matters into his own hands. If he was going to go, get the announcement sooner rather than later. Whether it was going to leak out and that explain the timing, I don't know. But it allows people to plan with transparency. And I think it's something to be applauded because there are players, there are staff, there are executives, there are processes, structures, the whole club that this has ramifications for, their family members, all manner of different things that will benefit from having a bit of clarity now. The other factor is that a lot of the players coming into this season, by virtue of their age or their contractual status, saw this as a bit of a final push, and it was even being referred to by some of them as like the last dance.
Yeah.
Now, that sort of points to players like Jordan Henderson moving towards the latter stage of his Liverpool contract, of Virgil van Dijk, who would be 33 in the summer coming and will have 12 months left on his contract. Mo Salah, into his 30s, will have 12 months left on his contract. Trent Alexander-Arnold will have 12 months left on his contract. Fabinho and Roberto Firmino were in the sort of later part of their Liverpool career. So this was going to be a push by this generation, this amazing group of players that Klopp had expertly built and nurtured and developed, heading towards like the Euro 2024, just to give it maybe one last go. And it didn't really work out like that because Firmino and Fabinho, as well as Jordan Henderson, all departed. But the other three went on. And we've had no news yet on their contracts. That may have been a bit of a warning sign with hindsight, because Liverpool would normally have sorted these situations out early doors and been very clinical with it. They wouldn't have let it get so far. But the fact that it has means that is a really important priority that maybe hasn't been spoken about as much because of the Klopp news. But Van Dijk, Salah and Alexander-Arnold are approaching their final 12 months, and they don't know who the manager or head coach is going to be, the coaching staff, the sporting director, and so much more.
Tense behind the scenes.
That makes this a critical period in Liverpool's modern history. And you mentioned the sporting director. So Jürg Schmadtke came in to help Jurgen Klopp in the summer of 2023. He continued for the January market, but now it's closed. He's leaving. It's over. They've had so much change in that department. Prior to Schmadtke, Julian Ward was there. That was only for a short period. He was the assistant to Michael Edwards and succeeded him. Michael Edwards previously left as well, and he was kind of the man who really built this alongside Jurgen Klopp and Mike Gordon, the president of FSG and the key director at Liverpool. What's interesting is that we reported earlier this week that last weekend, Mike Gordon, FSG president and key Liverpool director that I just mentioned, he called Michael Edwards and floated the idea of him returning in a senior role within Liverpool or at Fenway Sports Group itself, with responsibility for overseeing the Liverpool rebuild. And I think Michael Edwards shut it down pretty quickly, made clear that it was something he was not interested in doing and he would not be returning. And you could ask yourself, if you're a Liverpool fan, why didn't they go for him earlier and have this conversation before? But they were trying to keep it secret, as we've discussed, so it might have compromised the process. Michael Edwards is very invested in a new project that he's launched. I reported on it a while ago, Ludonautics, like a consultancy business to work with clubs and associations, with Ian Graham, who used to be the director of research at Liverpool. And so that appears to be his focus for now. I'm told that if Julian Ward was approached to return, he wouldn't want to do it either. Names like Richard Hughes of Bournemouth and Tim Stuyton of West Ham have been linked. The truth is, we don't know. We're going to have to see how this process
Are they going
unfolds.
to be shopping in the same market as Manchester United then, for that sort of executive level?
Potentially, because they both need to fill similar positions. And it's not the first time they'd have been competing sort of off field, because if you remember the story I did that Liverpool had, or Fenway Sports Group had put the club up for sale, were open to a full sale or partial investment. That was at exactly the same time, or shortly after, just over a year ago, while we were at the World Cup in Qatar, that Man United then announced that they were conducting a strategic review which could lead to a full sale. So they seem to do these things in a comparable pattern. But both clubs, I think, will have clear ideas, and there's enough good executives out there for them to make strong appointments. It doesn't make it any less vital a period. And in terms of Liverpool, just a quick bit on how that will be run. You've got Mike Gordon there. You've got Billy Hogan as chief executive. Their general counsel, Jonathan Bamber, has been increasingly influential in all matters at the club. And then you've got people like Will Spearman, who took over from Ian Graham as director of research. Basically, to explain, analytics gurus these guys are. They crunch the numbers, run the data. That department would have known that this was coming, no doubt, and, or at the very least, been preparing for this eventuality, like you should at all clubs. Brighton do it, forward plan for managerial changes. And they will have a clear idea of where they're going in terms of strategy, in terms of what fits their profile. Metrics and analytics above my intelligence level by a million miles. And so Will Spearman and his team will be key. And then you've got a renowned recruitment operation that includes David Fallows and Barry Hunter. And they will have also been sort of closely involved in all of this too. So they'll be responsible for what will be just a massive appointment or appointments. And at the same time, Man United are doing the same.
There we go then. I mean, you can breathe now, David. Deadline day is wrapped up. The 5 Insider is wrapped up. Going on holiday? Celebrate?
Yeah, going away first thing tomorrow morning for a bit of skiing. And
put your phone away. Put your phone away. How many messages do you get on like a deadline day? Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
Yeah, hundreds, and across the month, thousands, and the phone gets hotter as the deadline draws closer. But it's sort of par for the course. It's the nature of the beast, and it's something to be embraced and enjoyed. And it's so much of a privilege that so many people like and respect and value what we do. But yeah, the phone bill is high, as are the stress levels. The sleeping hours are low, but it's why we do it. We love it.
What about your screen time? On a deadline day, seriously, is your screen time upwards of 10 hours?
Screen time throughout this window was actually showing a reduction, which
is it above 10 hours?
That reflects how quiet the window was, maybe. But interestingly, with fewer transfers actually happening, you work harder to try and find out what is going on. And what you learn is that there are more conversations, or as many as ever, talks, negotiations, ideas being explored and developed. And you don't work any less hard. It's not for the want of trying, but it's just that in this particular market, the output wasn't as spectacular as the input. And what was your final bit?
What's the screen time? I want to know. Open up your screen time app.
I don't know how you do that.
And tell me exactly what your screen time is. Search screen time. I've got to know this. Sorry. I know that people at home are like, what's going on? But this is the sort of thing that people are interested in. What is David Ornstein's screen time? Daily average, 12 hours and 56 minutes. 12 hours, and it's basically all on communications.
Well, firstly, I thought it would be higher. That's less than half of a day. Well, no, sorry, it's just over half of a day. And secondly, that's incredibly unhealthy, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. You said towards the deadline. Towards the deadline, it must be disproportionately high. Yeah. And like
getting his excuses in there.
You constantly have to have the phone on charge and juice, because you've got to be ready to go, and at all hours, because the way the transfer market works now, and football and the world, is that there are things happening in different time zones and territories. And as the game globalizes and more players come in from different countries and more people work in different territories, and you're trying to get connected to them all, you've got to take calls or messages at all hours. And if you don't, there's the risk that you lose it. So in a way, it's like you can do as much or as little as you want to be as successful or as active as you like. And I've got to say, there are some amazing professionals and reporters and journalists and writers around this industry who I've just got so much respect for. And we see that on a daily basis. And maybe journalists and the media industry get some stick, but I think we do a pretty good job.
David, top man.